Hello and welcome to Right Sports Talk. My name is Zach. We've officially made it to the end of the 2026 UFL season as the UFL Championship, um, known starting this year as the United Bowl, takes place. Um, so the United Bowl takes place this Saturday, June 13th at 3 p.m. You can watch that on ABC. The game is being held in DC. As the DC Defenders, who are 6-5, take on the Louisville Kings, who are 7-4. Now it is just kind of a coincidence that DC wound up being in the championship game. It wasn't a case of one team. It's kind of like the NFL, picked at a neutral site, but the team that happens to play in that stadium made the championship game in the DC Defenders. Now DC, they got here by beating the Orlando Storm in the first round of the playoffs last week, and Louisville got here by beating the St. Louis Battlehawks last week. Now, for the DC Defenders, this is a bit of a revenge game for their starting quarterback, Jason Bean, as he started the season as the starting quarterback for these Louisville Kings, but got traded away to DC about halfway through the season. Now, speaking of Jason Bean, let's get right into it with my key players, and I'm going to start off with him in one of my key players for DC. First one I want to talk about is quarterback Jason Bean. He is coming off of a very good performance against Orlando, where he had 233 passing yards and a passing touchdown. He got knocked out of that game for a short period of time with a minor shoulder injury. However, he came back in and was able to help lead DC to victory. Jason Bean is a very talented quarterback. He showed tremendous talent during his time as a starter in Louisville as well earlier in the season. However, his issue was he made some bad decisions, turned the ball, had some costly turnovers for them. But the talent is very much there. And if he's able to put it all together like he did against Orlando, he could have a very good game against this Louisville defense. Now, next key players for DC are their running backs. They've got three very good running backs in Abram Smith, Deion Jackson, and Xavier Baladay. Smith and Jackson both scored rushing touchdowns against Orlando. And all three of these running backs had very good seasons this year. Abram Smith was 9th in the UFL in rushing yards. Deion Jackson led the UFL in both rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. And Baladay was not only 3rd in the league in rushing yards, he also led the league in kick return yardage. So showed that he is very talented, not just as a running back, but is very versatile and can be a very good kick returner and can help swing the game in the return game. Now moving on to their wide receivers, Cornell Powell and Ty Scott. Both of them were pretty quiet against Orlando this past week, as Powell only had 2 catches for 28 yards on 4 targets, and Ty Scott actually didn't have any catches, although he also had 4 targets. However, despite their lack of success last week, both these receivers have proven to be very productive and very talented, as Powell was 6th in the UFL in receiving yards this season, and Ty Scott was tied for 3rd in receiving touchdowns. So both of them have tremendous talent, and if they can find ways to get them the ball, they can be very dangerous weapons for this DC offense. Moving on to some key defensive players for DC. First off, their defensive end, Derek Roberson. He is coming off of a pretty good game against Orlando. He had 2 tackles for loss and a sack against Orlando. He was 3rd in the league in sacks this season. He was a finalist for MVP. He was in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. A very talented defensive lineman, very talented player that will be charged with trying to get after Chandler Rogers for Louisville and really try to slow down that offense. Next key player is linebacker Anthony Hines. Anthony Hines actually started his season on the Houston Gamblers, but near the end of the season wound up being released and picked up and signed with DC, where he has spent time in the past. So he's very familiar with this team. He was on the team last season. And he was 8th in the UFL in tackles this season. So, again, very talented linebacker, very good at making tackles. Very good sideline to sideline guy, very good leader of this defense. And moving on to corner, DeAndre Baker for DC. He is going to have a very tough test of having to cover some very good receivers for Louisville, but he has done a very good job of kind of taking away talented receivers this season. He is somebody that didn't have a whole lot of interception numbers, but also didn't seem like he was somebody that was being tested a lot every game, as if quarterbacks tested him, they weren't having a whole lot of completions. I'm very intrigued to see how he does against these very good receivers for Louisville. I also don't think I mentioned this at the beginning, but DC is the defending UFL champions. So they are trying to go back-to-back, trying to be, the only other team that has gone back-to-back in Spring League championships was Birmingham a couple of years ago. So DC is trying to be the first team since then to, really do that. Now moving on to key players for Louisville. Starts off the quarterback position with quarterback Chandler Rogers. He is coming off of a 162 passing yard and 1 touchdown performance against St. Louis this past week. So nothing too flashy for him, kind of continuing what he's done since really taking over as the starter, of playing well and doing enough to help the team get victories, not making a whole lot of mistakes, just being a very good game manager that has very, very much been able to help elevate this team to victories. Now moving on to, what started off as one of their weaker points in the season, but really the back half of the season has really flipped around and been their strongest point on offense, and that is their running backs, and Ian Wheeler and James Robinson. Both these running backs had long rushing touchdowns against the Battlehawks, and both of them were instrumental in helping Louisville have 168 rushing yards against St. Louis. These are two players that have very much really helped turn around what had been a very struggling rushing offense for Louisville. They both been able to have tremendous performances and really been able to step it up in the back half of the season and help guide and lead this offense and help them to a lot of victories in the back half of the season with their ability to really turn around the performance of this running game. Now, moving on to their wide receivers, the ones that will be tested by DeAndre Baker. You got Isaiah Winstead and Lucky Jackson. Winstead had a pretty good game this past week against St. Louis. He had 66 receiving yards and a touchdown. Winstead was 8th in the league in receiving yards this season, and Jackson was 10th in receiving yards. So two very talented players. Both have shown that they can really go off and have very good games. Both, like either one of them could, have 60 plus yards and a touchdown and have very good games against this defense, as they are both very talented and play very instrumental roles to this offense when they can get their passing game going. Moving on to defense, it starts first and foremost with edge rusher / outside linebacker Cam Gill. He had a pretty good game against St. Louis this past week. He had 6 tackles and a sack. He actually led the UFL in sacks this season and was named Defensive Player of the Year So he is going to be really on that front line of getting after Jason Bean and trying to make Jason Bean make mistakes, and really, really, pressure him, make him have a really rough game. Moving on to linebacker Jaheim Thomas, who was third in the UFL in tackles and had 9 tackles against St. Louis. This guy is all over the defense. Another sideline guy. If wherever the ball is at when there's a tackle, he's probably somewhere near that pile. He has a nose for making tackles. He's seems like he's always around the ball, always there to make a tackle. So he's another guy that can be very instrumental for this game. I'm moving on to corner Corey Mayfield, who led the UFL in interceptions this season, but he will also have a tough test against these DC defender receivers of Cornell Powell and Ty Scott. I think that'll be a very interesting matchup, as Mayfield has proven to be very talented this season. Obviously, he led the league in interceptions, so he's very good at baiting quarterbacks into thinking players are open and then taking the ball away. I'm very interested to see how these wide receiver and corner battles are going to go down this Saturday afternoon. And then my final key player is kicker Tanner Brown for Louisville. This past week, he made 2 4-point field goals, which, if you are not aware, a 4-point field goal is a rule in the UFL where any field goal that is 60 plus yards is worth 4 points. So he is the first professional league kicker in any pro league in history to make 2 60-yard field goals in one game. He was also really shown to be the best kicker in the UFL this season, as he led the UFL in total points. So he's somebody that, if they get really across the 50 to the point that you can't punt and you have to make a decision on what to do on 4th down, he's a kicker that kind of makes it easy for Chris Redmond, the head coach of Louisville, to maybe make a call to have him try the long field goal, the close to 60-ish yard field goal, instead of trying to go for it on 4th down just past the 50-yard line and risk giving DC really good field position if they don't get it. I think this is going to be a very good game. Obviously, DC has the experience edge in these games, as they are the defending champions. Their head coach Shannon Moore has more coaching experience than Chris Redmond does. Shannon Moore was the head coach of DC last season when they did win the championship. So I do think this will be a very good game. However, my pick for this game is going to be the Louisville Kings. They have just had a tremendous amount of momentum the past back end of the season, so past basically 2 months at this point. These are 2 teams that met each other twice in the regular season. Louisville won both of those matchups. So yes, it is very difficult for a team to beat another team 3 times in one season. See Orlando versus DC last week, where Orlando was coming off of back-to-back victories over DC, and then DC beat them in the playoffs. But I just really like what this Louisville team has done. I think they can establish a run game like they've been doing, for the back half of the season. I think that Chandler Rogers can continue to do what he's done and very well manage this game, make key plays where he needs to, not make mistakes with the football, and just help guide this offense. And defensively, I think they can get after Jason Bean. I think Cam Gill is going to be able to get after him. I think they're going to force him to make some mistakes. He's a player that they should know, a lot about his play style, as he was, their quarterback at one point. They practiced against him, all through training camp and then the first month of the season. So they have a couple months of going against Jason Bean in practice, to where, they kind of learn some of his playing style and try to figure him out. I just really like what Louisville has been doing the past couple months. I think that they have been playing like one of the best teams in the UFL, and I think that they go out against DC this Saturday and they get the win, and they are your 2026 United Bowl champions. So that is my predictions for this championship game. Let me know in the comments who you have winning. I've very much enjoyed making these videos all season. I just want to give a quick thank you to everybody that has watched them throughout the season. This is the type of stuff that I really love making videos on, really love talking about. So look, hopefully UFL can build off of this season and do something, make an even better experience for fans, make it even better next year. Um, so yeah, that's my pick for this game. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, see ya.